The game finished 3-3 today. Started off, Mike, with a wonder goal from Barella once again. His 9th goal of the season, if I'm not mistaken. Not bad as well.
Yep. Yeah, and his 3rd goal in the UEFA Champions League, now tied for team high. Inter isn't a team that scores often or that much as of late, but when they do, they make it count. This is a guy that lives for the big moment this season. He's taken his game to another level, picking and choosing when to arrive in the box, and when he does, he's got that finishing touch that you like to see from midfielders in an advanced role. Lautaro Martinez is another guy on the score sheet. His 1st goal in, I think, 10 matches. That is big for Inter Milan as they progress to the semifinals.
Nigel, before we get you in, let's bring Jonathan Johnson into the show with us as well. A little round of applause for Jonathan Johnson as he's entering the show right here. There he is. Welcome to the show, JJ. We're discussing, obviously, what took place in Milan between Inter and Benfica. And I just want to remind everybody, it wasn't 9 goals. It was 8 goals this season, all competitions for Barella. 3 Champions League goals this campaign from him as well. And also, a little stat for you here, Nigel, before you jump in. Nicolo Barella, the 3rd Inter player to score in both legs of a Champions League knockout fixture after Christian Vieri did it in 2002-03 in the quarterfinal against Valencia, and Dejan Stankovic did it in 2005-06 against Ajax Amsterdam. Nigel, your thoughts on this game in particular? Good little comeback and fight back, at least from Benfica. They didn't give up.
Yeah, they didn't give up. Good little comeback, but little too late for me. I think for me, again, when you look at the first leg and you look at this leg, Ian, the experience of Inter Milan showed how important it is. You know, and I see it so many times. We all see it when certain managers go into clubs and they want to rely on youth and stuff. Great. I believe best football clubs that we see in world football are a mixture of experience and youth. That is the best way to be. There's very few clubs who can come with the right amount of youth to ever win something of any significance. It doesn't happen. You need experience. And I think that's what showed today. When you look at this Inter lineup, the amount of experience that's there, not just domestically, internationally as well as the Champions League. That is what really was the downfall of Benfica. I thought Benfica were fantastic. I feel that they're only really a couple of players away from it. I think they're really lacking that creative element. And also, I'll say now, watching this Benfica side, I see now what Enzo Fernandez brings to this team. And selling Enzo Fernandez as reluctantly as they were, I think he could have played a huge difference in this game. But the experience of Inter got them through. And Inter look good. Inter look good. And I'm going to be honest with you, Inter remind me of that very average Chelsea team that won the Champions League not so long ago.
It's really interesting that you say that, though, Nigel, because it takes me back to the beginning of the second half. And I thought when Benfica had that penalty shout, which I admit, I thought was a nailed-on penalty. I thought it's not really going to matter that much in the grand scheme of things. But when you look at how Benfica got back into it in the last 10 minutes, suddenly that penalty decision takes on a lot more importance. You know, you potentially add that on. There's only 1 goal in it. And who knows how Benfica would have played had they been sort of back in it as they were at that stage, because they would have actually been leading on the night had that penalty been awarded and had they scored it. So for me, I think Benfica can feel hard done by there. Did leave it a little too late, unfortunately. I do think that over the 2 legs, they probably could have raised their game a little bit earlier than they did. But, you know, still something to potentially work towards for the future. Like you said, totally right. You know, having Enzo ripped out of the midfield, unfortunately, midway through the season doesn't help. But, you know, if Benfica have showed us anything over the last couple of years, they don't miss the key players that they cash in on. So I'm sure that they will be back with a well-retooled squad for next season. And I think Roger Schmidt can, probably feel a little frustrated that his team have kind of crapped out a little bit in the last couple of weeks, because they were in fantastic form in the first half of the season. But overall, I think the better team advanced.
Yeah, I'm with you there, JJ. I think obviously they can feel hard done by. They just haven't performed when it mattered most, right? It's been a fairy tale journey to get to this stage. And then all of a sudden, once you get to the big dance, right? We're talking the latter stages of a Champions League. Getting to a semi-final would have been a tremendous achievement. It already was a tremendous achievement getting to the quarterfinal, considering they've sold over €1 billion worth of players over the last 5 years. It's very difficult to do that, to be competitive when you continuously sell your best players. And to Nigel's point, what would this team be like had they kept a hold of maybe 2 or 3 of those players? Just impossible for them to do so with the offers that come in. Let's turn our attention to Inter, who now face Milan in the semi-final. It is a bit of a mouth-watering tie, but Inter domestically, Mike, not doing great. But in the Champions League, especially the way they started, they knew if they got a draw, they were through. It's easy to kind of, take your mind away from the fact that a draw does enough for Inter to go through. They started off very well again with Barella, and then obviously continuing the goal scoring going through this game. I thought they played well overall, Inter, in this game, and over the two ties, definitely deserve to be in that semi-final.
Yeah, they were more measured in how they played. Watching them as of late in Serie A, it was end-to-end stuff. You're getting goals, but then the goals start drying up. And the back line, that was a big question mark in league play. The back line looked a bit more assured. Late on, not so much, but the tie was done and dusted. You take off some of your danger players in attack, you're going to absorb a lot of pressure. In this matchup, in the semifinals, who would have thunk that we'd have a Milan derby? When it was teed up, when the knockout stages were rolled out, we were talking about Napoli being the team. It was Napoli versus Napoli, direct path to the final. Now it's going to be a Milan team, and I think rightfully so. These are two teams that are getting hot at the right moment in the UEFA Champions League knockout stages. And mind you, this isn't the sort of gimme game that some teams or some people might be thinking that it's going to be a one-way traffic for AC Milan. Inter Milan have beaten AC Milan twice since the turn of the year. A player who loves to play against AC Milan, Lautaro Martinez. This guy shows up. We all have those games as players. You remember it. I remember it. Nigel, you remember it. When you see a team on the team sheet, I'm going to have a good game. AC Milan is that team for Lautaro Martinez, and it's going to be one heck of a matchup.
Hey, Mike, before you jump in, JJ, Mike, I want to jump in here, just a little quiz time for you and everybody out there who's actually listening. Lautaro Martinez has scored 9 goals for Inter in the Champions League. Only 4 players have scored more goals for the Nerazzurri in the competition. Can you name those 4 players, Michael Lahoud? JJ, feel free to jump in. Nigel, you too.
You said for this season?
No, not this season, all time.
All time. Shevchenko?
Nope.
All right.
Shevchenko? For Inter.
For Inter. I'm not even thinking of the right.
I'll just give you the answers. How about that one? This one's taken a while. Adriano with 14, Julio Cruz with 13, Hernan Crespo with 11, Samuel Eto'o with 10. JJ smiling because he probably would have got all 4 of them. Nigel?
Not sure. No, I was just thinking actually, Cruz is a good one. He was kind of a deceptive player because he'd always pop up off the bench, but you wouldn't have him at the top of one of those lists. But no, I mean, I'm excited for the Milan derby, and I do think it's a bit of a throwback as well. It's been a while since we've had Italian teams making deep runs like this in Europe. It's actually the first time that Inter have been to the semifinals of the Champions League since 2010 when they won it under Jose. So I do think that it comes with a good amount of prestige, and it'll be a real occasion. Both legs, obviously, it's to be played in the same stadium is always quite unique as well. So it's something to look forward to for sure. And I'm sure it's going to be keenly contested. Just fingers crossed, that it's not as dull as the last time these two met at this late stage in Europe, when I think it finished 1-1 in one of the games and 0-0 in the other. So one of them advanced on away goals.
I'd just like to clarify something before we get into it, Ian. Michael said about we used to look at lists when we were players of a certain team that we wanted to play well against. That wasn't my style. I was Mr. Consistent. I was all about consistency. So I didn't have a specific team to pick like Michael, who picked and choose when he would turn up. There's a difference there of consistent players. Anyway.
Nigel Reo-Coker, the shithousery connoisseur.
No chance. Must be about 2-foot, yeah. Anyway, listen. Mike pre-covered it up. I think for me, though, the only thing I'll disagree slightly with Mike is I feel that for me, Inzaghi and Inter Milan will be concentrated on the Champions League more so than the domestic form. I think that's a way for Inter Milan to really save their season, and also for Inzaghi as a manager to save himself. I think really and truly, when you look at them domestically, this is something great, and this is the game that they'll concentrate on. I think their priority will be the Champions League, while AC Milan is still obviously competing domestically, very far behind Napoli, but they're still competing. So I think that this is going to be a priority for Inter Milan. So I think that's where the slight difference comes, in my opinion.
Real quickly before we do go to break here, JJ, obviously the Juve verdict, we're all waiting to see if they'll get their 15 points back. Would that be a distraction for both Milan clubs? Because both of them are not guaranteed to end up in a Champions League spot, top 4 spot in Serie A if Juve do get their points back.
Yeah, I mean, it suddenly ups the stakes even more. I mean, I don't think you really need much more motivation than being in a Champions League semi-final against your bitter rivals. But then suddenly, if you see Juve getting those points back, obviously very contentious, but that sounds like, it's starting to become more of a reality in sort of the last couple of hours. Obviously, we'll all have our eyes on the Italian scene the next day or so to see when those announcements actually get made. But, if suddenly Juve rocket back up that table with those points reinstated, that completely changes the complexion of the way that these two teams will be sort of, balancing whether they still prioritize Serie A and the Champions League. I mean, to be honest, to me, it sounds ridiculous that you would prioritize Serie A when you have this opportunity to get to a Champions League final and to beat your most hated rivals in doing so.